Episode 17. All right. Ladies talking. Okay. Episode 17 in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 17. I'm back here under a full moon with my main man, Jimmy Kennedy, to ring in the summer and recap the week's events. How you doing, Jimmy?
Doing fantastic, Noel. What's been going on with you, man? How are we feeling?
Chilling, feeling good. Derek Chauvin just got sentenced to 22.5 years in prison, and I'm sure we would have all preferred a life sentence, but that was not going to happen to an ex-cop. But that's a pretty substantial sentence. It's not anything, worth a man's life, but it's going to give pause, hopefully, to some of this abuse that's been going down. It's some form of justice, and I'm happy to see it. I'm somebody who most of my life the cops would walk, and that's not happening anymore. So that's a good thing. And what about you? What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I think the George Floyd situation changed it for everybody. The fact that everyone was home watching the news when it happened and that it was on tape. Somebody had the presence of mind to go on Facebook Live and record it as it was happening. And I think people finally began to see that, for better or for worse, this is a system that's been going on for a long time. And law enforcement, even with a badge, has to be held accountable and should be held to a higher standard, quite frankly, because they have the badge backing them up. They should live up to what law enforcement should be. And at this point, Chauvin is not a guy that has those kind of morals,
Yeah, no, he's a bad dude and he's going to jail. And, you mentioned someone recorded it. It wasn't just somebody. It was a young African-American woman who's now getting a special prize from the Pulitzer Prize Association for her journalism, because it was heroic journalism. It was the most important journalism that happened in that last year. And it wasn't exactly a slow year for news. But what she did will live forever in humanity, and it helped bend the moral arc of justice in the right direction. And something like that is invaluable. And technology takes a hit, but it's changing the world in that ways, because, that kind of thing happened with impunity for the first 200 years in this country in policing, 300 years. Had it been 1970, it would have just been a DOA that they would have sent right to the morgue. You would have never heard anything about it. All those people would have still witnessed it, and nobody would have listened to them because they couldn't prove it to the greater world beyond, and it was people seeing what people in these neighborhoods had always known. When I was a kid, NWA came out and everybody was like, oh my God, this is horrifying. F the police. How dare they talk about the police like that? And they were right. They were reporters. That was reporting. Okay. Those were like Bob Dylan songs. They were telling us what was going down, but the world wasn't ready to hear it, and then we saw Rodney King. Then we did see it because there was tape and everybody was outraged and they let the cops off. Because back then, especially in Simi Valley, which is where the trial was, it was an all white jury. And they're like, nope, we're not sending a cop to jail, but now times are changing, and that was the difference in this case, is that white people joined the cause. And it's not to say that, like, it's tricky to say something that it's not saying that the white folks that got involved are the heroes of this situation. We're not. We're supposed to get behind our African-American brothers and sisters and say, what do you need? How do I show up for you? I want you to talk on this, but I want you to know I'm behind you. Speak on the truth and let me support you in that. Let me march with you. And that's what people did, and in the midst of all this, we learned a couple things. The protests that happened across the street from Lafayette Park last summer were because of this, because of what happened to George Floyd, right? Nationwide protests. They spill over into Washington, D.C. They end up across the street from the White House. And we find out yesterday that Donald Trump is sitting in the Oval Office with Stephen Miller, some other advisors, and General Milley, a guy who's a Green Beret, who was like 6 tours of duty, went to Harvard. He's everything you want in a warrior: an intellectual, a badass, a disciplined, sober man. Right. So he's sitting in the office with him, and Trump's like, hey, man, go over there and crack their skulls, go shoot them, and he's like, we can't do that, sir, and he's like, well, just shoot them in the legs, just wound them. Like, that's insane, right? And then Stephen Miller chimes in and was like, yeah, they're laughing at us. We need to like take action. And General Milley apparently spun around in his chair and goes, shut the fuck up, Stephen, which I'd give you everything I own to be in the room right there and witness that one thing. I'm going to have that put on a t-shirt. But, that was, Trump wasn't down with the protest. He was pissed that white guys were like supporting, racial injustice and police brutality. Because in his world, that's what happens. That's what happens in New York. NYPD is like that. Not all, because there's minorities on the force, but all the cops that I grew up with is the most racist dudes you're ever going to meet. And people will lie to you and pretend like they're not, because they're their brothers and their fathers and uncles and they like them. And I have ex-NYPD cops that I love, that I consider family. They're close enough to me. I've known them forever, but they're racist. They're racist. Like, Staten Island is a racist place. And the guys who go into that job get turned into racists. We had an ex-NYPD on this show. He told you what it was like, and that guy used the N-word all the time back when he was a cop. He said that was the job. That's what they told you to do. Go into the neighborhood and beat up black people. That was Mayor Giuliani's policy. That was the broken windows policy of policing, was terrorize minorities for the betterment of white society. Because if you scare them and lock them up, maybe we can bullshit some statistics that crime has gone down, which was never the case anyway, But yeah. So Trump does this, and it comes out yesterday that he wants to attack and shoot protesters. You're about the age of some of those protesters, Jimmy. Like, how does that make you feel? You've spoken on this before. Like, how does it make you feel that the president of the United States would have been more than happy to look out the window of the White House, rub one out while you're getting blown away across the street by a military rifle?
Well, I don't want to make it especially dark, but with me and having a walker, I would be the easy target. That would be the person that would go down first. As somebody with a disability. That's Saddam Hussein type stuff, man. Like, that's a dictator. An authoritarian does stuff like that. We don't have any civil rights anymore if Trump remains in office. If he's having those kind of thoughts when it comes to civil liberties and people, demonstrating in public. It's scary shit what's happening right now.
You're damn straight it's scary. And that's who Trump is. People probably think I was being hyperbolic when I said, like, he will be hanging people on the lawn of the White House. If he gets reelected, he will be having public executions of journalists. And people are like, oh, that's crazy. And I'm like, no, that's who he is. He's Game of Thrones. He's like that sick little king on Game of Thrones. What was that king's name?
Jeffrey?
Yeah, a little kid, That's who Trump is. He's been a sadist since he was a little kid. He threw rocks at his neighbor's baby. Healthy people don't do that. They don't look at a child in a jumper and say, I'm going to throw a rock at that fragile little creature. Psychopaths do that. The kind of people that torture animals. That's why dogs bark whenever they see Trump. I've been around where they had like security bomb sniffing dogs, like going through the museum when we were filming. And whenever they'd see Trump, they'd start barking. And those dogs are trained not to bark. They bark when there's a bomb or a threat. And that's how they see Trump. He smells bad. Not just, he does actually smell bad because he wears diapers and, eats Big Macs all day or cheese hamburgers or whatever, McDonald's. But like, he smells bad, like from a soulful perspective. If you pick up on vibes, the dude's got dark vibes. So yeah, he would have looked out the window. He would have enjoyed seeing people get killed in broad daylight on TV because it would have given him the rush that he always wanted, feeling like he has the power of life over death, right? That's why all this sexual stuff is abuse, is abusing innocent girls and women, raping people. That's a violent act. He's trying to assert dominance. When you ever see him shake someone's hand and he tries to pull them in close, like he tries to demean you because he feels demeaned inside. And he tried to make that policy. He tried to use our military as an arm to sort of live out his own sadistic fantasies. Think about that for a second. And that's why I spoke out, by the way. When I started doing stand-up and talking about him doing Adderall, which is all true, the point wasn't really like, oh, he does Adderall. He snorts his Adderall. As I said, if he could have done his job, no problem. Like if you could do the gig, I don't care if you use drugs. But what I saw underneath him, that dark soul of somebody who would like kill somebody else to feel more alive, that's terrifying in a leader. And that's a great example of what I was warning people about. The pressure was on and he got humiliated. Okay. He reacted that way because the reports came out that he went down to the bunker the night before. If you remember in DC, the night before, they imposed a curfew and they had helicopters flying around to disperse crowds, and the stuff got serious and he had to run down to the bunker, and it leaked that he went down to the bunker. So the next day, everybody's like hashtag bunker bitch on Twitter, and he lived on Twitter. So he saw it in his mentions and it made him angry and feeling less than and humiliated. So he tried to use our military to assert himself, to become a bully. And he was willing to kill American citizens, children, essentially. Those protesters were like college kids and stuff. It would have made, Kent State look like, nothing. It would have been a bloodbath. And it's also curious that when his protesters, which aren't protesters, they were attackers, went up to the Capitol, there was no calls to open fire, right? He wanted to open fire on a bunch of college girls and people with like George Floyd posters, right?
Well,
but when 10,000 people are attacking the Capitol, hey, stand back. Nobody carry any guns. Don't send in the National Guard. They're just tourists.
Well, and he said too, we love you, go home. We love you. And you had talked about it. He was probably hoping for an opposition. He wanted bloodshed on the Capitol steps, and then he could impose martial law, and take whatever steps he had to maintain power. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why the stand down orders were in place, because he was hoping that it would have gotten so crazy and somebody would have gotten killed, right? That is, people would have killed a senator. They would have murdered Nancy Pelosi, God forbid, or Mike Pence or somebody. And then there would have been chaos for hours, right? Because the troops wouldn't have been able to react immediately. And it would have just been a horrific situation that he could then assert military dominance on and say, everybody just calm down. Everything is locked down. We're not accepting the results of the election. And they're still trying to do that. Like that's still what the game plan is with all these recounts and stuff. I ran into Trump. I didn't speak with him, obviously, but I happened to be sitting on Fifth Avenue in my car on Sunday, on Father's Day. And he pulled up. He was going into the side door of Trump Tower, on 56th Street. And they shut down the block just like they did when he was president. A bunch of NYPD came out with these big, huge guns, assault rifles, and they're like, back up, stand down, back up, this huge brutalist show of force, And I'll remind our listeners, 2 other presidents live in New York City, okay? Clinton lives in Westchester, but his office is on 125th Street in Harlem. Barack Obama lives on the Upper East Side where I live, right? So there's 2 other presidents that go about business in New York City, and they don't shut down streets and have NYPD show up in tanks with guns, right? But Trump did that, and it's this show of force. And people gathered on all 4 corners when he got out to take their pictures, and they screamed out, "We love you." And they weren't MAGA people, and they weren't like hipster New Yorkers either. Nobody like that goes on Fifth Avenue anyway. It's like where you go to get ripped off in a Coach store or something. It's like where Kim Kardashian would shop, or somebody who aspired to be, a poor man's Kim Kardashian. It's all kind of junk, upscale junk. It's not junk. I mean, it's brand labels if you're into that kind of big time brands, but Louis Vuitton, that kind of crap. So, it's not, I'm trying to paint you a picture of the kind of people that are strolling around there, but they were all like, "We love you, man." And they love the celebrity of it. It's a game show. They're not reading between the lines, So he's working 2 forces there. The brutal, I'm in charge. Here's the image. I'm the king, and also here's the fame, because he turned around and waved at him and they all cheered and stuff. He didn't slink out of the SUV into the thing. He gave him what he wanted. You know, he gave them what they wanted, the little taste of fame. And you hear me say it all the time. That's what these MAGA rallies were. You know, they were WrestleMania.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know what? I think the dream come true for Trump would have been to be like uh, a manager for a professional wrestler. You know, he wouldn't even have the physical demands of having to wrestle week to week. He would be like Paul Bearer with Undertaker, you know, and just lead somebody and make the pop and circle. That would be the ideal job for Trump. You know, he could work for Vince McMahon for 20 years, go to the WWE Hall of Fame and have all the pop and circumstance as a result of that. But you know, he always wants more. My point is, he's like McFoley. You know, he's a guy that can announce the city that he's in, and he's going to get cheers. You know, just because of who he is. He's a P.T. Barnum, like we've said before. He's such a marketer, and he paints himself as such a big force that he is kind of larger than life, whether you want him to be or not.
Oh, he's much larger than life. You know, he's dominated American life too. You know, that's the tragedy, is that we don't get these 5 years back. You know, we don't get the 600,000 people back, but we don't get the psychic like attention that we've had to pay to one of the most awful human beings that this country has ever created. You know, the guy was somebody who should have gone away when he was 15 years old, been locked up somewhere in a state facility, and nobody would have ever had to see him again. Okay. Because he contributed nothing to life. He took from life. And then he spawned these children that are just as bad, just as venal, just as morally repugnant. You know, and Ivanka Trump is trying to rehash her image this week. You know, her and Jared leak these articles to the press, and like moths to the light, you know, Maggie Haberman and these guys will repeat these things, you know. So the big story that came out this week, because they knew that charges are coming against him, right? Because Trump's attorneys on Thursday had to go talk to the Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, in his office about how these charges are going to come out against Trump organization, right? They're probably not ever going to go after Trump, as I say all the time. If you think he's going to get a perp walk, he's not Derek Chauvin, okay? You're not going to get that satisfaction, okay? I promise you. They'll go after the organization. They'll dismantle the organization. You know, he'll go bankrupt once again for the 7th time. You know, that'll be what happens. He's not going to go down. His people aren't going to flip. And we'll get into that in a minute. But so Ivanka knows this is going down, right? The lawyer, they have to tell your lawyers, prepare to have charges filed against you, right? So the lawyers are in all these meetings. That's why Trump's in Manhattan. He knows they're going after Matthew Calamari, who's his big enforcer. Matthew Calamari is the guy who, you know, hits you with a baseball bat and throws you in the trunk, essentially, and drives you out to the wetlands, you know, before he buries you. And Keith Schiller's the guy who digs the grave, you know, and then Michael Cohen's the guy who pretends like he knew all about it because he's trying to sell you a book, but was actually nowhere there. You know, he was in Vegas paying off a hooker. But anyway, that's kind of how that thing works, you know? So Ivanka knows this is all going down, and she's scared because she was basically in charge of the Trump organization. And she's tried to play dumb, like they deposed her earlier in DC or something. And she was like, yeah, I don't know Alan Weisselberg. I'd have to look up his title. Really? Because he worked for your fucking grandfather, okay? He's worked for your dad's company and your grandfather's company for 50 years. He signed every check that you ever cashed, you know, from the time that you were at Choate Rosemary Hall to the time you were sniffing coke at Penn and blowing dudes, you know, at the frat parties, okay?
Yeah, I mean,
that's who he is. You know who Alan is. You know, you went to his fucking parents' funeral on Long Island, okay? You know what he does for your company. But she's trying to distance herself. So she puts these things in the press like Ivanka and Jared are distancing themselves from their father, right? First of all, they built a 5,000 square foot cottage in Bedminster, okay, where Trump lives for the summer. They renovated a huge cottage there while they were still in the White House, all right? They're building a mansion in Miami on a private island, okay? They're not distancing themselves from their father. They know it's going down, and they're hoping they can reinvent themselves once again. They made $640 million while they were in the White House. While you were paying Ivanka and Jared's salary, while Jared was looking up every file he could on every secret our government held and selling them to the Israelis and the UAE and the Saudis and anybody else who would pay him a dime, they were getting paid, you know, not only in their own ventures, but by our government. And they'll never get in trouble. Okay. That's like I said, they'll go after the organization. They're not going to bring charges against Ivanka. And the press should be honest about that, but it's a game, right? Oh, we'll get headlines if we say Ivanka's trying to rehab her image because everyone will get pissed and they'll click on it, and it's
exhausting.
Yeah, it's exhausting. It's just bullshit. Like, people don't understand how this country works. Wealthy white men get away with things that black guys and minorities and people that aren't born rich don't get away with, right? Like, once again, it came out this week, the attorney general is going to protect Trump. He might represent him in these lawsuits against those protesters we just talked about at the top of the show, right? The attorney general might defend Trump against the people that are suing him that we just found out yesterday he wanted to shoot. He wanted to murder them. They weren't a threat. They weren't armed. And the attorney general might protect him because, hey, he was president. You can't really be suing a president now, can you? Yeah, you can.
Right.
Right. And if you're thinking that, like, just going after his company is going to be the comeuppance he deserves, you're tripping. They deserve to be in jail. People always talk about, like, well, they finally got Al Capone on tax evasion, as if that's a good thing, right? Get him on the St. Valentine's Day massacre, get him on gunning down a bunch of people with Tommy guns for 30 years, so he cheated on his fucking taxes. That's not justice. That's the sort of tell of how corrupt our system is. Hey, we don't get the unseemly stuff on the rich white guys or the mobsters. We get them on a technicality sooner or later, and send them to a country club. Send Trump to jail for being a sexual predator. Make him stand trial for raping E. Jean Kelly in fucking Bergdorf Goodman, and 100 other girls in the last 30 years that, didn't have the bravery. Not that they weren't brave, they just didn't have the means to come forward. E. Jean Carroll is a hero, and all those women are heroes, but not everybody can speak out. People would be like, why didn't they do anything? Well, dude, there's a NYPD cop standing outside of the hotel room door where he's doing this to you. He's a huge guy, and he's taking you downstairs afterwards and putting you in a cab and saying nothing ever happened, right? Go home now. And the next day you're getting a call from Michael Cohen or somebody just like him, and they're sending you a check and an NDA, and you're going to sign it, and you're not going to mess with this dude, and then you're going to bury that in your life, and it's going to come out and hurt you in other ways, but he's going to get away with it. He's going to protect himself from that behavior. And I know people he's done it to. As I said before on the show, I know a girl he started grooming when she was skating at his ice rink when she was fucking 12. So the guy is a predator, but he, and if he was a poor guy in the Bronx pulling that shit, he would have gone to jail a long time ago. But as I always say, he's a rich white guy with his name on the side of the building. And now he's a former president. Now he can get the NYPD to shut off traffic and hop out with machine guns because he needs to get out of his SUV and walk 20 feet into his building.
Well, and you've talked about that, NYPD has tanks, and they wouldn't probably find a need to use them, if they didn't have them, right? Because they have them, they feel the need to use them. And I also thought about this last week, and I'm not equating what happened. I'm not justifying what happened, but, Bill Clinton was impeached for a consensual blowjob, like that's ultimately what happened outside of the scope of the original investigation. Trump cites an insurrection, and has the whole Russia thing happen. I mean, there was like 3 major phases to his criminality, and nothing happens. Like, I'm not equating what Bill Clinton did, but when you compare the outrage that the GOP had in the 90s to the outrage that they don't have now, it's Manchurian candidate type stuff, man. Like, they're brainwashed.
Absolutely. And not to mention the same guy, Ken Starr, who went after Bill Clinton, was one of Trump's biggest cheerleaders.
Yeah.
The same guy had no problem looking the other way and cheering on Trump on Fox News and all these other places, but wanted to go after Bill Clinton. And I've met Bill, full disclosure, I met Bill Clinton a lot. I know Bill Clinton kind of. He comes over, he puts his arm around me when he sees me backstage. I think I've talked about that on this show. I was his escort on a lot of events. I like Bill Clinton a lot. He was a brilliant guy. Was he a poon hound? Yes, he was. Did he abuse his office? Should he have accepted that consensual thing? No, he shouldn't have done it. It was poor judgment, but it wasn't it wasn't, it wasn't anything approaching the kind of stuff that Trump did. Just take the COVID stuff alone, right? This other brilliant Washington Post article came out yesterday. So, Trump gets COVID in October or whatever, and they get on the phone. When he starts getting really sick at the White House, they get on the phone with Alex Azar and they say, hey, those monoclonal antibodies or whatever, we need you to fast track that and like send a couple over to the White House right now. And he's like, what are you talking about? The FDA goes through this whole process. We don't know if they're safe. We're talking about people's lives. We can't just give it out. And they're like, no, you need to make it happen now. Trump's sick, right? So he gets these things, right? And within a day or two, he snaps back and feels better. And all these people are like, great, now he's going to take this thing seriously. It almost killed him. His life was saved by science. Hopefully now he'll put on a mask and tell everybody to be smart. And what does he do? He invites Mark Burnett to shoot a TV commercial when he gets out of Walter Reed, right? He flies in his helicopter as the sun is setting, takes a big circuitous route down the Potomac by the Kennedy Center. That's all Mark Burnett. Mark Burnett is obsessed with helicopters. He gets a hard-on for them, and so does Trump, right? They take this big flight. They do this big staged landing on live TV. Trump wheezes his way up the stairs on the south lawn of the White House, right, to the balcony. He can barely get up there. I mean, it looks like he's going to die walking up there, right?
Yeah.
Rips off his mask, puts it in his coat pocket as if it's some, salutes an empty helicopter, turns on his Cuban heels and walks back into the White House. And Robert Redfield, the CDC director was like, that's it. It's over. He's never going to take it seriously, And at that point, there was probably, 150,000 people had died. That was at the beginning of the second surge, which just roiled this country last year in the late fall. And now we got 600,000 people dead. So again, he only cared about himself, and getting that in the same reporting when he was like having these events, because he caught it when he was Amy Coney Barrett was, he had that party for Amy Coney Barrett, and they were all bringing in these people in the White House in a room, and he got freaked out. He's like, I don't want these people close to me. I want them here. Like, he wasn't worried about their safety. He was only worried about that they might get him sick, and they actually did. But I mean, that's what shows who he is. He doesn't care about other people. That is a psychopath. There's a lot of people in life that are just assholes and not generous of spirit, but then there's people that are like, I'm in charge of like this country and leading it, and I don't care if people die, and I'm just gonna like get my life saved. And within a 2-day period, he couldn't even like have any sort of a spiritual awakening, even in a nanosecond, like, yeah, maybe it's a good idea to put on a mask and stay 6 feet apart. He wasn't asking people to do a lot, it's just like, hey, keep your distance and put on a fucking little piece of cloth in front of your lips when you're out in public. It's not that hard. 5 generations ago, people stormed a beach in Normandy knowing that they were going to get killed within the first 10 feet. And they did it for the greater good. We're asking you to wear a mask, big boy. Wear a fucking mask. You got a Punisher sticker on your big pickup truck. Now's your chance to act like a man. But they couldn't do it. And they were led by a coward who only thought about himself. And now it's become a religion. Now it's pervasive. Tucker Carlson on Fox News last night showed the clip of General Milley once again, because he was on Capitol Hill this week, and he gave a brilliant answer to a question about wokeism. He goes, we're educated. We want people that we're your right. Generals. You're paying us to know what's going on. We need to know what people are thinking that we're asking to fight on our behalf. Get brilliant answer, right? And Tucker Carlson showed that clip last night and goes, first of all, he's not just a pig, he's stupid. And then Tucker gave his little fish sticks air laugh, right? And that's what he said. That's Tucker Carlson. That's poison, man. Any other country, you'd get yanked out of that chair in a second, right? You think that would happen in Russia if he was speaking against Putin or something, or one of Putin's generals that way? But
do you think Tucker would have the balls to say that if he didn't have the Stouffer's, fortune fall back on, or whatever the hell it is? Right. Like he's such a jackal. Like, can somebody just shut him up at this point? Like, he's chipping away at democracy, man. How can we have this go on like this? Millions of people watch him every night, man.
Yeah, and they all do it. There's a jackal chick who comes on a couple hours after him, white lady. I don't know what her name is, blonde.
Oh, and then that smug Levin. whatever his name is.
They're all horrible. Let's not even.
They're all horrible. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to break your.
Ingraham. There's an Ingraham who's even worse. She had on like somebody who pled guilty in court for their part in the Capitol attack last week, right? And then Ingraham had her on that night, and the lady basically took it back. All her contrition was gone, and she was just like, yeah, we were just walking around in there. I was helping an old lady through the door, like nothing happened, and now I've lost my job. She was just whining, and Tucker's thing was like, there's no such thing as white rage. It's like, you are white rage. You guys got rageful about putting on a mask. We asked your dumbasses to put on a fucking mask when you walk into a supermarket, and it was more than you can handle. And you showed up at state houses with guns and screamed that you couldn't do it. Yeah. What if white people had to endure half the stuff that African Americans have had to endure in our history? They would break. They would break. Yeah. You were challenged with one thing and you couldn't do it. And I'm a white guy, but like, it's insane. We're so backwards in so many ways as a country, and it's dangerous. It's much more dangerous than people realize. The Trump is kind of on his way out, right? But a Ron DeSantis, you barely survived a Trump administration. You won't survive a Ron DeSantis administration. I promise you that, okay? You will get your executions. You will get only Fox News and OAN on the networks, okay? That guy ain't going to compromise with anybody. Not that Trump did, but that guy is Trump 2.0 on steroids. He had a press conference today for the horrific tragedy of a building collapse in Miami, right? Yesterday. And like, what was his response? He immediately started talking about his 2024 presidential campaign and attacking immigrants. He immediately went into his own talking points and becoming combative. That's Trumpism, and that'll sell. That'll be what's on Fox News tonight, and people will vote for him. Because, they're already brainwashed. You're not pulling a lot of people over from the ranks of Trumpism, right? They've all been fed these lies. I saw on Twitter today, they're attacking Milley. They're like, oh, he sold out years ago. He's been bought off. There was a time when a guy like General Milley with a bunch of medals on his shoulder, on his chest, that's who like Republicans considered themselves. It's like Eisenhower, jack booted, like, I don't mean that bad, like these buzz cuts, whatever you call them, jarheads, I mean? Like, they're not the anti-hippie, a rigid, serious, like military guy. That was the Republican Party. That was their avatar, so to speak. And now they're able to throw a guy under the bus in a second because Tucker Carlson says he's a pig. Tucker Carlson, who did his service at Trinity College on a squash court. You know what I mean? Like, who's never worked an honest day in his life. When he lives in Great Falls, at least he used to, which is a fancy suburb of Virginia. And Dave Grohl used to live there, who I've worked with a lot with Foo Fighters and go way back with in DC. And he walked over to Dave's house one time, this is like the mid 2000s, and left Dave a note and was like, hey man, we should hang out and get a beer together sometime. Like, I heard you're in the neighborhood, And I never talked to Dave about that, but I know he never did. I know he,
right. Yeah.
But it's just it's insane that all these people are able to turn against themselves so quickly because some dude who's getting paid tens of millions of dollars is sitting on Fox News telling them to what they should think and what they should believe. And these people have done no service in their own lives. They have no accreditation to be making these claims. They're just doing it because they know you're a bunch of rubes and you're going to believe it, and Trump's still on the airwaves. And there's basically 100 Trumps now every day. And the Democrats are sort of playing into this idiocy in many ways. Biden's like, oh, we got to compromise. And he's on the White House lawn. And I love Biden. Don't get mad at me, listeners. But he was out there yesterday on the driveway with Sinema and Manchin and all these guys and, 5 other GOP senators. They're going to turn on you. That's all my thought. They're going to turn on you. It's not a compromise. And what happened today? Mitch McConnell shut it down, said he wasn't playing ball. And now they're starting to peel off. One of them just peeled off this afternoon and said, unless I get assurances from Sinema and Manchin that they'll vote no on this other thing, on the whatever the other bill, the names escape me right now, then he's out. he's out of the infrastructure thing, so they're not going to do business. They're going to play you. That's what they did to Obama. Not that Obama got played in an intellectual way, but you try to do business. They say they're going to go along with you. They will draw it all out with all these compromises, and then they back out anyway, So you just need to do it. You need to get rid of the filibuster. You need to turn the screws on Manchin and Sinema, who are basically plants. They're being paid by the Koch brothers to be chaos agents. And you just got to realize what you're up against and fight it appropriately.
Well, and I don't think we should fool ourselves, that Schumer, Pelosi, and Biden, they're part of the system too. What the hell is taking them so long? They know that democracy is hanging on the filibuster. Why haven't they undone it at this point? Because they're part of the system too. For better or for worse, we were governing from a far right position, like an authoritarian type of country. But now we're governing more from the middle. Joe Biden is certainly not a progressive, not based on his voting record. He's more of a moderate, and I think that's why you're seeing some compromise on both sides. But this is a paralyzed democracy. It's not functioning properly. That's for damn sure.
Absolutely not. And time is not on our side, as I always say,
Yeah.
And you're right. Those other guys are creatures of an old order. Your Chuck Schumers, your Pelosi's, your Bidens, they're all great people and they served in a certain way, but it's just not this world anymore. That's not reaching across the aisle. It's the Tea Party and whatever that became, it's MGT, or MTG or Lauren Boebert, Back to Ron DeSantis. This week, he said Florida schools and universities now have to report the political beliefs of the students enrolled in them. Okay. That's insane. That's North Korea mass indoctrination stuff, and that's what's happening. The Fox News and the OAN, and then in schools that can't teach critical race theory, they're building an army. Right? They're keeping the truth out. The truth is the enemy, because once people go through a couple cycles of believing this bullshit, they turn into soldiers for that cause. And that is what's happening. So all the weeks that you're wasting negotiating with these senators that are negotiating in bad faith anyway, and are going to screw you at the 11th hour because Mitch McConnell tells them to, while you're doing that, these other troops are coming to power. And these are the people that are going to back up the voter restriction laws, that are going to allow the gerrymandered districts to continue in places like Texas. The governor of Texas just voted against a bill yesterday, vetoed it, that was an anti-dog abuse bill. It said you can't lock your dog up in like 100-degree heat with no food or water outside, right? Pretty simple, no-brainer. You think most politicians would be like, yeah, I'm not going to oppose that. He vetoed it. Because he knows Trump hates dogs, right? As I said at the top of the show. So he knows that would be against the MAGA political belief, because cruelty is the point. And anything that has to do with compassion or nicety to animals, no, it's guns, God, and flags, and just being as big an asshole as you can be.
I think the thing that blows my mind, it's not that there's thoughts of the MAGA brand, because I think that's always going to be there. In America, you're always going to have your Ford F-150, and everything else is, everything's bigger in Texas. We've talked about Texas and bitched about that state, but I think it just blows my mind that these Trump folks they don't want to think. They just cannot actively think about what they're actually seeing, look underneath it, look between the lines, for God's sake. Don't just look at it at face value, man. Get outside and talk to a person of color, like gain some experience outside of your little bubble that you've forced yourself in. Pisses me off, man.
I hear you, brother. Jimmy's getting pissed off, everybody. You can't see it. He's getting all hot.
I don't know, man. Having grown up with a disability, I'm going to be the only kid in the hallway with a walker. Okay. People are going to ask me questions right away. So I knew early on, try to get to know as many people different from you as possible, because you're going to have a fuller life experience. But, these folks just want to surround themselves with people like them. And to me, that's pretty damn boring.
Exactly. But that's the conditioning. We were taught to accept brands over experiencing things. That was part of the whole Reagan revolution, and the Southern strategy, infused more racism and more kind of xenophobia. At the same time, it gutted cultural institutions and the arts and things like that, So people, it's like, you're into a football team and all you think about is your own football team. Your football team can't do anything unless there's other football teams, right? It'd be pretty boring to watch your team play against its own practice squad every Sunday, right? You need the team of Oakland to make it a game, right? And it's the same way in our society. You need all these different flavors to make it a spicy gumbo that actually does something. All the things that these people celebrate were contributions of other cultures. There's nothing uniquely American here at all. It was the Native Americans who lived there, and we committed genocide on them and have done nothing to preserve their cultures. That's not to say there aren't institutions trying to protect the lineage of Native Americans, but think about what we have lost. Just in that alone. Like how many things that we'll never know as not just a people as Americans, but as like sentient human beings. How many things were probably lost to the planet forever when we slaughtered a people that had lived in harmony with nature, for tens of thousands of years, for eons, that knew the land intimately, that lived on it in a beautiful way and saw their own humanity in every living creature. And worshiped every creature, even when they had to eat it or use it, to keep warm in the winter, use its skill. They used every part of that being and they exalted it, right? Now we turn chickens into chicken McNuggets and weird shaped things and fry them. We've dehumanized everything, the food we eat. That's bad for you after a while because you lose your connection to the earth. The indigenous peoples had no word for trash. Okay. They had all these different languages, all these different words. They never had a word for trash. Okay. Because the concept didn't occur to them. There was nothing disposable. Everything had its place and its use, right? We're all trash. Our whole society is just throw everything out. We drink water in individual plastic bottles that we then throw out in a landfill that end up in the ocean, 2 weeks later. There's a garbage patch in the ocean the size of Texas floating around. That's going to kill us. It's going to kill us all. And we don't even question it, because Coca-Cola makes those products, and PepsiCo and all these other companies that donate money to your favorite Republican candidates and your favorite Democratic candidates. It's all part of the same system in a lot of ways. That's why you got to get big money out of politics. It's like I always say, you see a big yacht, super yacht, nobody got that yacht without hurting somebody, even the person who bought it, because just the amount of energy you're using to roll that way on the ocean is insane. You don't have the right to do that. You're part of an ecosystem. We're part of a greater good. And if you protect that, you live a happy life. If you try to carve out some little greed for yourself and some wealth for yourself, you're always going to be at war. You might think you're not going to be, but you are. Because you look at all these people we're talking about, none of them are happy. Trump's never had a happy day in his life. He's never had a grandkid say, I love you, Grandpa. They say, Mommy, don't make me go with him. Like you can see any of the grandkids when they walk with him. He's a horrible person. And he raised horrible kids. You ever seen a photo of Don Jr. standing with his kids? They're right. You know what I mean?
They look terrified, dude.
Because he's abusive. He was abused. He's going to abuse. That's what happens. It's the curse on the house of Atreus. Violence begets violence. Abusers grow up to abuse other people or abuse victims. Not always. You break the cycle, and it's hard to break cycles. It takes awareness and it takes compassion. But that's the kind of stuff that was gutted from this country to build this kind of army we're talking about. One of the first things Reagan did was deregulate all the mental health institutions, basically kicked them all out. All these people that didn't belong out on the streets because they couldn't handle life. They needed help. They had a medical condition, mental medical condition, and they needed the states to take care of them. Nope, we're not paying for that anymore. That's how he created homelessness. I mean, that was essentially, I've discussed it before. There used to always be, a couple vagabonds and people out there, but then it just became
widespread.
Yeah, it's everywhere. People sleeping on the street in the nation's capital, and in the New York City. And now it's never been worse. But that's that lack of compassion, you know, it kills its host. You think like, oh, I'm going to get mine and screw the other guy. And it just never works. It just never works. And we're at war with ourselves in many ways now as a nation because of that. And we need art, we need light, we need music, we need humor. I'm actually a comedian. If anybody's listening, you might not be aware of that by what I talk about on this show, but it's important. It's important that we understand that we're all in this together, because we're all going to go down together. Whether we want to or not, we only got this one country and this one planet, and it needs our help.
And a guy that I've always respected in the entertainment industry had his last show yesterday, Conan. We're recording this on Friday. And Conan had one of the best quotes I've heard in a long time. He said, if you do what you love with the people that you love, that's heaven on earth, and we need to let Americans believe that that's actually possible for themselves, which is why Joe Biden's having these holistic problem solving kind of bills, infrastructure to make sure that no lead pipes are a problem in the future. But like you've said before, the Koch brothers are about they're chaos agents. They don't want infrastructure getting fixed, because that means that people are going to get healthier, and you won't have a constant system of sick folks to send through, what's been a perpetual cycle of just BS in, BS out,
Yeah, and it's market-based management. It's cheaper to have a rusty old oil pipeline that might spill than it is to take that thing offline and make the repairs. Okay. That's how the oil industry has always functioned. Okay. Anytime the oil's not flowing through those pipes, you're losing money. Okay. And it takes a long time to shut it down and make a repair. It's easier to just kill some wildlife and have a spill and pay a fine to the government. The fine is a fraction of the money that they make. And that's emblematic of what our philosophy is, like a capitalistic philosophy that's been completely corrupted. That's what Eisenhower was warning people about, himself a Republican who'd been to war, so, it has to change at a fundamental level. And Conan's a great guy. It's a weird segue. I've met Conan a bunch, never, I wasn't a comedian when his show was on. It was always behind the scenes. But I told this story a little bit on Twitter. A lot of what I did in live TV was called like talent escorts. That was my side of things. Was I worked in the department and I was one of them a lot. I got paid at it. I was like the top guy in many ways to do that. But basically, like if you see live people on a show, celebrities, we assign somebody behind the scenes to stay with them, right? So if you're Beyonce and you're doing the gig, somebody's going to be assigned to you, and we're going to make sure that person stays outside your dressing room and make sure all your management knows where to go when it's time to, find the bathroom or get to stage, or you need any water, whatever it is. And we give them a headset and keep in communications with them. So we were having a meeting at Radio City for the Emmy Awards, I believe. And we're out there in the lobby having the meeting with these 100 kind of volunteers that are coming in to help us. And Conan O'Brien happens by. And Radio City is attached to Rockefeller Center. It's across the street, but it's part of the same complex. And so he came by, and he had his talk show on NBC at the time. He goes, "Hey, is this the escort meeting?" He goes, "When I was a writer at SNL, I was an escort. They asked me if I wanted to be a talent escort, and I'm this dorky writer guy. So I was like, heck yeah, I want to do that." And in his head, he was going to be with like Brooke Shields, like going to meet Madonna or something, And he shows up to do the show, and they assign him to Estelle Getty, who's awesome. Yeah. But she's like 4.5 feet tall. And if you've ever met Conan, he's like 8 feet tall. He's one of the tallest people you'll ever meet. He's at least me, I'm 5'7". He's a tall guy. So it's just hilarious, and he told that story with such love to us, and he knew what he was doing by telling the story to these guys. And that's how he was. I did the TBS upfront every year for quite a few years. Obviously, his show was on TBS, and I was assigned to him more than once. And he was always like, he would come out, in the stairwell where you were hanging outside the door and be like, "How are you doing?" and joke around with you and stuff. And very, very like cool guy in that respect. And my friends are in his band. You know, a very good friend of mine, Mark Pender, was the trumpet guy. If you ever see the bald trumpet guy when you watch his show, that's one of my good buddies, Mark Pender, who also
Okay.
played Springsteen's band. And, you know, I know Jimmy Vivino, the guitar player and stuff. And I won't get into it here, but I happen to know the kind of things that Conan has done for those band members. You know, when he went through that whole thing with Dust Up with Leno, and you know, he'd already told people they already moved their families out, you know, out to California, and then the gig ended. You know, like he made sure they were taken care of, and he got another contract that he kept him on the payroll, you know, for decades after that, or you know, 10 years. And that's the kind of guy he is. Behind the scenes, he's going to take care of you. And he's also a massive guitar collector, which I would love to hear more about someday. So I hope Conan like puts out a coffee table book or does some kind of show with his collection, because you know he's been making some money. And I've always fantasized about the kind of guitars he would buy, because I'm a guitar collector too, but I don't have the funds, you know, that Conan does. And he's also got Jimmy Vivino in his band, who has one of the great guitar collections and really knows his stuff. So I can't even imagine the kind of stuff that Conan has collected in the last 28 years he's been in live TV. But mainly he's collected laughs, you know, and he's collected good karma, and he's collected love, and he's done it the way he wanted to do it. And he's a smart guy, you know, he's a smart dude who that was reflected in his work. You know, he's a smart, compassionate guy. So we haven't heard the last of Conan O'Brien. And I'm jealous of my friends who got to do stand up on his show. But good for Conan, man. Who else? What else?
Well, I just wanted to say too, I love Conan as well. He was on The Simpsons even before he got his talk show. You know, like the guy's been involved with a lot of different comedy and went to Harvard. You know, like you said, he's a smart guy, and he also speaks Spanish fluently. Or at least he has on the show before. That's always impressive to me. We've already talked about the infrastructure bill. Yeah, man, like it's just, I don't know. At this point with Trump and everything going on, it's like, what is this all for? Like the My Pillow guy, a failed reality TV star, like it's kind of lost its sizzle to me. The whole pursuit of trying to overturn the election, like give up already.
Right. But they're not going to give up, Jimmy. That's the whole point. It's just about creating the chaos, grifting the money, and stalling. You know, they're buying time for your DeSantis's and for your Tucker Carlson and for all these other guys to get more troops, you know, to get more people ginned up. There's going to be a whole new generation voting in this next presidential election. You know, kids that were, you know, 14 and 15 and 16 watching all this crap go down are going to be of voting age. And they were living in homes with dads who were buying all, and moms that were buying all this BS, you know, that think like Trump is still the legitimate president and it was stolen from him, you know, and that invective and that resentment is going to get launched at the next Democratic candidate, you know, and if it's Kamala Harris, you know, against a Ron DeSantis, that's the, you know, that's what they're going to run on. They're going to run on racism and resentment. Okay. And that's a mighty potent, you know, brew. You know, that's a dangerous thing. So in the meantime, and then we're coming up to the end now because we've been giving people a lot of harshness. Next week we'll get into Eric Prince and stuff. But because there's more, I can't keep up with all the stories that broke this week, and they're all so dark that we've just touched on a few here, me and Jimmy. But I'm getting ready for a comedy tour. I'm gonna start touring again and playing clubs and stuff. So I'm gonna be at the Ram's Head in Annapolis, Maryland on September 16th. So if you live in the Baltimore or DC or Northern Virginia area, come on out and see me. I'm from Maryland originally. It's going to be a good time. It's a music club that I was last in with Stephen Stills, ironically. 10 years ago, I was there with Stephen Stills when we were doing this club tour after Neil Young bailed out on the Buffalo Springfield tour that was supposed to happen and be like 30-something shows. And they did like 7 or 8 shows, including Bonnaroo. And Neil was like, nah, I'm out of here. Which is what he does, you know. So then Stills was pissed off, and we were playing clubs all throughout the fall. And we had a particularly memorable gig at the Ram's Head, but it's a wonderful club, man. Great food. You like crab cakes, Jimmy?
Oh yeah, big fan. Always.
There you go. Nothing like those Indiana crab cakes.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that when the Patriots beat us or we beat the Patriots in the AFC Championship, and they sent the Colts crab cakes That was the gift. So New England crab cakes, and then we sent them St. Elmo's stuff. So
and St. Elmo's invented the shrimp cocktail.
Oh yes, has Trump ever had a St. Elmo's shrimp cocktail? I think the cocktail sauce would probably knock him out.
Good point. That's a good point.
I don't know. He'll probably try to sniff that after his Adderall. Really get the high of the cocktail sauce.
Jimmy's coming with the jokes today. Jimmy's got his hair slicked back. You guys can't see it home. You got a date tonight, Jimmy?
I'm trying to get one. If anybody's available, you can slide my DMs or whatever. But
oh, ladies, you hear that? Jimmy's on the market. It's summertime. It's getting spicy out here.
Yeah. Jimmy's single, ready to mingle. So
damn. All right. Well, this is a family show, Jimmy.
I'm sorry.
It's all good. I'm just
all appropriate.
Ladies, get at your boy. Holla at your boy. And once again, everybody, thanks for listening. I know it's kind of a diatribe, but we're not out of the woods yet, and we gotta keep our our noses to the grindstone or whatever. It's an awful term. I don't know if that's the phrase, but
just be aware,
gotta be aware.
Yeah.
Aware.
See what's going on.
Exactly. Because it's going down. It's going down fast. And if somebody who's listening to Fox News, turn them off. Turn it off. Ask them about the Miley stuff. The General Milley. Just be like, is that really what you believe? You think Tucker Carlson is the right guy to call that dude a pig?
Right.
Those guys, they fought and bled for this country. And the guys that are manipulating you never did. They sat in their country clubs and they sat in their prestigious Ivy League schools and they looked down on people like you. Because I know those people. Okay. I live amongst them and they don't think a lot of you. Trust me.
As do I. Yep. I know.
So, exactly, as does Jimmy. So, it's a scam and you don't want to fall for it. In the meantime, enjoy your summer. We'll be back next week. We're heading into the July 4th holiday. It's the last week of June right now. So have a good one. Get out to the beach or get outside and get back in nature because nature will always heal you. So once again, folks, thanks for listening. Last week's episode had like 10,000 downloads, which for us is an all-time high. So tell your friends, download us, subscribe, come see me in Annapolis, Maryland on September 16th. You can listen to Jimmy's podcast, JBK on Air. Where can they find that, Jimmy?
Any of the places, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google. It's all on the main servers. So there
you go. Hit him up. He's a main server kind of guy. So until next week, we'll see you, folks. Thank you. Noel Casler Podcast, episode 17. Peace.